June 15, 1984, and the mountain town of Breckenridge, Colorado, was bustling with tourists enjoying the early summer season, with families hiking trails, shopping in downtown boutiques, and taking advantage of the clear weather before afternoon thunderstorms typical of the Rockies. Main Street was crowded with visitors browsing art galleries and souvenir shops, and outdoor cafes were filled with people enjoying lunch while watching the constant flow of pedestrians and vehicles. Rebecca Hawkins was 7 years old that Friday afternoon, a girl with wavy red hair that reached mid-back, green eyes, pale skin that freckled easily in the mountain sun, and a shy personality that made her cling to her mother in crowds. She wore denim shorts with embroidered flowers on the pockets, a lavender t-shirt with a rainbow and clouds, white canvas sneakers with rainbow laces, and she carried a small disposable camera her father had given her to photograph their vacation. Rebecca had come to Breckenridge with her parents, Tom and Linda Hawkins, from their home in Kansas City, staying in a rented condo for a week-long family vacation in the mountains. At approximately 1:30 p.m., the family was walking along Main Street after lunch, and Rebecca asked if she could take photos of the colorful storefronts and mountain views visible from the downtown area. "Stay on this block where we can see you and take your pictures, then come back to us," Linda instructed at 1:32 p.m., watching Rebecca walk about 20 feet ahead to photograph a building with bright murals. Main Street was crowded, but the sidewalks were wide, and Tom and Linda could see Rebecca's red hair and lavender shirt clearly as she moved slowly, taking pictures of things that interested her. At 1:35 p.m., Rebecca paused to photograph a store window display featuring stuffed animals, and Linda turned to look in a gallery they were passing, keeping Rebecca in her peripheral vision. A tour group of approximately 30 people emerged from a nearby shop at 1:36 p.m., creating temporary congestion on the sidewalk as they gathered to hear their guide's instructions. The group blocked Linda's view of Rebecca for approximately 20 to 30 seconds, and when they moved on, and Linda looked to where Rebecca had been standing, her daughter was no longer visible on the sidewalk. Linda called Rebecca's name and walked quickly to where she'd last seen her, thinking Rebecca had moved further down the block or stepped into a doorway to photograph something. But Rebecca wasn't anywhere in the immediate area, and her distinctive red hair wasn't visible in either direction along Main Street, despite the hair color being easy to spot in crowds. Within 1 minute, Linda was frantically asking people if they'd seen a 7-year-old girl with red hair in a lavender shirt carrying a camera, and Tom was running in both directions, checking shops and alleys. By 1:40 p.m., several tourists were helping search, and store employees were checking their businesses, and someone had called Breckenridge police to report a missing child on Main Street. In approximately 20 to 30 seconds, while a tour group briefly blocked her mother's view on a crowded sidewalk, 7-year-old Rebecca Hawkins vanished from downtown Breckenridge without anyone seeing where she went. If you want to hear how this little girl was finally identified after 40 years, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and comment where you're watching from. Now let's continue. Breckenridge police arrived at 1:45 p.m., and Officer David Martinez immediately organized a search of Main Street and surrounding blocks while obtaining detailed descriptions of Rebecca from her distraught parents. The red wavy hair became the most distinctive identifying feature, along with the lavender t-shirt and the small disposable camera Rebecca had been carrying to take vacation photos. The spot where Rebecca had last been seen photographing the store window was examined, and investigators interviewed people who'd been in that area, but nobody recalled seeing her after the tour group had passed through. The tour group that had created the brief obstruction was identified, and members were interviewed, but none remembered seeing a young girl with red hair or noticing anything suspicious during those seconds. Tom and Linda were interviewed about whether Rebecca would have wandered off on her own or followed someone if offered something interesting, and both insisted she was cautious and wouldn't leave the block without permission. The disposable camera Rebecca had been carrying was never found, and this detail troubled investigators because it suggested she hadn't simply wandered away, but had been taken along with her belongings. Bloodhounds arrived by 3 p.m. and tracked Rebecca's scent from where she'd last been seen, but the trail became confused on the crowded Main Street with thousands of people having walked the same sidewalks. By evening, over 300 volunteers were searching Breckenridge and surrounding mountain areas, checking trails, parking lots and businesses, calling Rebecca's name and showing her photo to anyone they encountered. Summit County Sheriff's Department coordinated the search with resources from multiple agencies, and the case immediately became a priority given the vulnerability of a 7-year-old in mountain terrain. FBI was contacted by 6:01 p.m., given the potential for abduction from a tourist area, and Special Agent Catherine Wells arrived from Denver with resources and experience from similar cases involving children disappearing in crowded public places. Agent Wells interviewed Tom and Linda extensively about their vacation and whether anyone had been paying unusual attention to Rebecca during their time in Breckenridge. Linda mentioned that a woman had complimented Rebecca's red hair at breakfast that morning in their condo complex, but the interaction had seemed innocent, and the woman had moved on without further conversation. This woman was never identified despite investigators canvassing the condo complex, and she became one of several unresolved leads that offered no clear direction for the investigation. Detective Robert Chen focused on the 20 to 30-second window when the tour group had blocked Linda's view, trying to understand how someone could have taken Rebecca in such a brief time frame. Someone would have had to act very quickly, Chen explained, grabbing Rebecca and moving her away from that spot before the tour group dispersed, which suggests either opportunity or planning. Surveillance cameras at businesses along Main Street were checked, but in 1984, camera coverage was minimal, and the few cameras that existed captured only building entrances rather than sidewalk activity. One camera from a bank showed a portion of Main Street, and investigators reviewed footage from 1:30 to 1:45 p.m. looking for Rebecca or anyone leading a child away. The footage was grainy and at a distance, but at 1:37 p.m., a figure in what might have been purple or lavender appeared briefly before moving out of frame, possibly Rebecca being led away. But the image quality made positive identification impossible, and investigators couldn't determine if the figure was being led by someone or walking independently. By Saturday morning, the case had become major news across Colorado and neighboring states, with Rebecca's photo appearing on television showing her distinctive red wavy hair and freckled face. The lavender t-shirt with rainbow and clouds became a key identifying feature mentioned repeatedly in media coverage, and tips began coming in from people claiming to have seen her. One witness reported seeing a red-haired child getting into a car near Main Street around 2 p.m. Friday, but the description was vague and couldn't be verified through other witnesses or evidence. By late June, the intensive daily search operations had been scaled back after 2 weeks, produced no trace of Rebecca, despite thousands of volunteer hours and extensive professional investigation. Tom and Linda remained in Breckenridge for 3 weeks, unable to leave while Rebecca was missing, and they appeared repeatedly on local television pleading for her return. "Rebecca is a sweet, gentle girl who loves taking pictures and exploring new places," Linda said through tears. "If someone has her, please let her come home. She's only 7 years old and she needs her family." The case was featured on America's Most Wanted in August 1984, and the broadcast generated thousands of tips, but investigation revealed each was either mistaken identity or well-meaning but inaccurate information. By 1990, the case had essentially gone cold with periodic reviews, but no active investigation, and Rebecca Hawkins became another child who'd vanished from a crowded tourist area despite her parents being just feet away. Age progression photos were created, showing what Rebecca might look like at 12, 17, 25, 35, and these images were distributed through missing persons databases as years passed. Tom died in 2008 from a stroke, and he died without knowing what had happened to Rebecca or whether she'd survived the disappearance that had occurred during what should have been a happy family vacation. Linda never remarried and devoted herself to missing children advocacy, working with organizations to improve child safety in tourist destinations and supporting other families searching for lost loved ones. The disposable camera Rebecca had been carrying became symbolic of the case, representing the vacation memories she'd been trying to create when her life was stolen, and the photos that would never be developed. By 2020, Rebecca would have been 43 years old, and Linda held memorial services each June 15th in Breckenridge, standing on Main Street, where she'd last seen her daughter. The years passed slowly for Linda Hawkins, with 1984 becoming 2000 and then 2010, and Rebecca's bedroom in their Kansas City home remained exactly as it had been, filled with photos and mementos from the 7 years they'd had together. Linda became a prominent advocate for missing children, speaking at conferences and working with law enforcement to develop better protocols for responding to abductions in tourist areas. She testified before Colorado legislature about the need for enhanced security and immediate response systems in mountain towns that drew millions of visitors, and her advocacy helped pass reforms improving child safety. Detective James Morrison took over the cold case in 2015, and he used modern technology, including enhanced video analysis, to examine the 1984 surveillance footage, hoping contemporary software could reveal details impossible to see decades earlier. The enhanced footage confirmed that someone in lavender had been on Main Street around the time Rebecca disappeared. But even with improvement, the image quality couldn't provide definitive identification or show who else might have been present. Morrison also used databases to search for adults who might match Rebecca's age and description, but had questionable origin stories or gaps in their early childhood documentation. By 2024, Rebecca would have been 47 years old, and age progression photos showed a woman with red hair graying at the temples who might have resembled Linda, though the family feared she'd died in 1984. True crime podcasts discovered Rebecca's case in the early 2020s, and several shows featured detailed episodes about the Breckenridge disappearance and the 20-second window when a mother's view had been blocked. In March 2024, a genealogist named Maria Santos, who specialized in helping adoptees find biological families, was contacted by a client named Sarah Mitchell, a 47-year-old woman from Seattle, seeking information about her origins. Sarah explained that she'd been raised by her aunt Dorothy Mitchell, who died in 2023, and while going through Dorothy's belongings, she'd found documents that raised questions about her early childhood. Dorothy always told me my parents died in a car accident when I was 7, and she took me in and raised me, Sarah told Maria. But I found newspaper clippings about missing children from the 1980s, including one about a girl named Rebecca Hawkins who looked exactly like me. The clipping showed a 7-year-old with wavy red hair and green eyes who disappeared from Breckenridge in 1984, and Sarah was disturbed by the resemblance and the fact that Dorothy had kept the article for decades. Maria agreed to help Sarah investigate using DNA testing, and she submitted Sarah's DNA to genealogical databases to see if biological relatives could be identified. When the results came back in May 2024, they showed unexpected matches to people Sarah had never heard of, including a woman named Linda Hawkins, who appeared to be a close biological relative. Maria contacted Colorado State Police, and Detective Sarah Chen from the Cold Case Unit began comparing Sarah Mitchell's DNA against Rebecca Hawkins's profile that had been in databases for years. The DNA analysis took 10 weeks, and when results came back in July 2024, exactly 40 years after Rebecca's disappearance, they showed a 99.95% probability that Sarah Mitchell was biologically Rebecca Hawkins. The confirmation sent shockwaves through the cold case community and made international headlines. Rebecca Hawkins had been found alive at age 47, living in Seattle under the name Sarah Mitchell. Detective Chen's investigation revealed that Dorothy Mitchell had been in Breckenridge on June 15, 1984, though she'd lived in Wyoming and had no apparent connection to Colorado or the Hawkins family. Dorothy's background showed she'd lost her only child to drowning in 1982 at age 5, and according to former therapists whose records Chen obtained, she'd never recovered from the loss. Chen theorized that Dorothy had been in Breckenridge that June day and had seen Rebecca's distinctive red hair, which had reminded her of her deceased daughter, and in her grief and mental instability, she decided to take the child. The tour group blocking Linda's view had created the perfect opportunity, and Dorothy had approached Rebecca during those 20 seconds, likely claiming to be helping her find her mother or showing her something interesting. Rebecca, focused on taking photos and trusting an adult who seemed friendly, had followed Dorothy away from Main Street before anyone noticed, and Dorothy had taken her to a vehicle and driven immediately back to Wyoming. Over the following weeks and months, Dorothy had convinced 7-year-old Rebecca that her parents had died in an accident and that Dorothy was her aunt taking care of her, and eventually Rebecca had accepted this as truth. The revelation that Sarah Mitchell was Rebecca Hawkins devastated and transformed her understanding of her entire life, learning at age 47 that she'd been kidnapped and that everything she'd believed about her origins was fabricated. Detective Chen handled the discovery with extraordinary care, connecting Sarah with therapists who specialized in recovered missing persons and the complex trauma of learning your identity had been stolen. Sarah was shown photos and videos of herself as Rebecca before the abduction, seeing the lavender t-shirt and red wavy hair, and watching home videos from the Kansas City house where she'd lived for 7 years. "That's me," Sarah said quietly, looking at childhood photos. "I can see myself in that little girl, and something about these images feels familiar, like my brain is trying to remember, even though I can't consciously access the memories." The meeting between Sarah and Linda was arranged for August 2024 in a neutral location with counselors present, and both women approached the reunion with 40 years of grief, loss, and overwhelming emotions. Linda recognized elements of Rebecca in Sarah's face, despite 4 decades of aging, and she brought the disposable camera Rebecca had been carrying, which had been found in Dorothy's belongings and never developed. "I kept looking for you," Linda said through tears. "Every single day for 40 years I wondered where you were, if you were alive, if you remembered me, and I blamed myself for looking away those 20 seconds. Sarah examined the disposable camera that she'd been holding when Dorothy took her, and Detective Chen arranged to have the 40-year-old film processed by specialists to see what photos Rebecca had taken. The developed photos showed Main Street in Breckenridge from a child's perspective, colorful storefronts and mountain views, and the final photo appeared to show a woman approaching, possibly Dorothy, in the moment before the abduction. "I don't remember taking these pictures," Sarah told Linda, "but seeing them now, it's like witnessing my own kidnapping from my 7-year-old perspective, and it's surreal and heartbreaking." Dorothy Mitchell's journals, discovered after her death, revealed the depth of her mental illness and her obsession with replacing the daughter she'd lost to drowning. "I saw a beautiful red-haired girl in Breckenridge," one entry from June 1984 read, "and she looked exactly like my Lily would have looked if she'd lived to be 7, and I knew God had sent her to me." The journals described how Dorothy had followed the Hawkins family along Main Street, waiting for an opportunity, and when the tour group had created the obstruction, she'd acted immediately. "The mother turned away for just a moment," Dorothy wrote, "and I told the little girl I would show her where to take the best pictures, and she came with me so sweetly, trusting me completely." Dorothy had driven Rebecca to Wyoming immediately, and over the following year she'd moved to Washington State, putting maximum distance between them and Colorado before enrolling Rebecca in school under the name Sarah Mitchell. The fraudulent documents Dorothy had created were sophisticated enough to pass scrutiny in the 1980s, and Sarah had grown up believing she was Dorothy's niece, whose parents had died tragically. Sarah struggled with complex feelings about Dorothy, unable to completely hate the woman who'd raised her, even knowing she'd been kidnapped, because Dorothy had provided education, stability, and what seemed like genuine love. "Dorothy gave me a good life in many ways," Sarah explained. "She supported my education, helped me through college, was there when I got married and had my children, but she also stole 40 years from me and my real mother." Linda battled anger toward Dorothy for the decades stolen from them, but she was grateful that Rebecca had survived and been raised well, unlike so many abducted children who suffered far worse fates. "I'm grateful Dorothy didn't hurt you physically," Linda told Sarah, "and I'm grateful you had opportunities and safety, but she stole your childhood from me and stole me from your childhood, and that's unforgivable." Sarah's husband and adult children were supportive, though they struggled to process that their wife and mother had been a missing child from Colorado with an entire family they'd never known about. The case brought renewed attention to how children can be taken in seconds from crowded places, and how predators exploit brief moments when parents' attention is diverted even slightly. Colorado passed legislation in 2024, requiring enhanced surveillance in tourist areas and immediate alert systems when children go missing from downtown districts in mountain towns. Sarah chose to legally become Sarah Rebecca Mitchell Hawkins in September 2024, honoring both the life she'd built for 47 years and the identity that had been stolen from her at age 7. She traveled to Breckenridge in October 2024 to stand on Main Street, where she'd been taken 40 years earlier, hoping to trigger memories that remained frustratingly locked away in her subconscious. "I don't consciously remember being here," Sarah told reporters, "but standing in this place where my life changed forever, where Dorothy took me from my real mother, it feels significant, even though I can't access the actual memories of that day. Colorado installed a memorial on Main Street with Sarah's photo from both 1984 as Rebecca and 2024 as Sarah, along with text explaining the case and emphasizing vigilance in protecting children. The memorial reads, "Rebecca Hawkins, taken 1984, found alive 2024, lost in 20 seconds, searched for 40 years, a testament to a mother's unwavering love, transforming the site of tragedy into a symbol of hope." Sarah met extended family members she'd never known, aunts and uncles and cousins who remembered 7-year-old Rebecca and who'd helped search the mountains 40 years earlier. They shared stories about Rebecca's personality and interests, helping Sarah understand who she'd been before Dorothy had created the Sarah Mitchell identity. "You loved photography even at 7, one uncle told Sarah. "You were always wanting to take pictures of everything, and it's amazing that you became a professional photographer as an adult, like some part of who you were stayed with you." Linda and Sarah worked to build a mother-daughter relationship, despite being essentially strangers, and they found connection through shared mannerisms and the biological bond that DNA had confirmed. Sarah introduced Linda to her grandchildren, young adults who were fascinated to learn about their grandmother in Kansas City and the extraordinary story of how their mother had been a missing child found 4 decades later. The case inspired legislative changes in Colorado, requiring better protocols for immediate response to missing children in tourist areas, including mandatory surveillance camera coverage in downtown districts. Rebecca's law also required that rental properties and hotels in tourist towns provide child safety information to families, including emergency contact numbers and what to do if children go missing. Sarah established a foundation supporting adults who discover they were kidnapped as children, providing resources for DNA testing, therapy, legal assistance, and help navigating the complex process of integrating 2 identities. Within its first year, the foundation facilitated 11 identifications of long-term missing persons, proving that DNA databases continued to solve cases from decades past. The Breckenridge community installed a permanent display at the visitor center, featuring Rebecca's story and emphasizing the importance of child safety during mountain vacations. Sarah wrote a memoir about discovering at age 47 that she was Rebecca Hawkins, and the book became a bestseller, inspiring other adults with questionable origins to investigate their backgrounds. Her story led to 7 additional cases being solved in 2024 and 2025, as people who'd wondered about gaps in their childhood memories submitted DNA and discovered they were missing children. Linda lived to see Rebecca found and to build a relationship with her daughter and grandchildren, a miracle she'd prayed for through 40 years of searching. The lavender t-shirt with rainbow and clouds that Rebecca had worn was found preserved among Dorothy's belongings, and Linda gave it to Sarah as a tangible connection to that June day. Sarah keeps the shirt displayed in her Seattle home, alongside the disposable camera and the developed photos showing her final moments before Dorothy took her from Main Street. She continues her photography career while maintaining close relationships with her Kansas City family, traveling quarterly to visit Linda and build memories with the mother she'd lost at age 7. Sarah told reporters that learning she was Rebecca Hawkins was both devastating and healing, destroying the identity she'd known while giving her back a family and history she'd been denied. "Dorothy Mitchell stole 40 years from me and my biological mother," Sarah said, "but she couldn't steal my future. And now I have both families in my life, the one I built as Sarah and the one I was born into as Rebecca." The story of Rebecca Hawkins, taken at age 7 from a Colorado mountain town and found 40 years later as Sarah Mitchell through DNA technology, stands as one of the most remarkable missing persons cases ever resolved. It reminds us that 7-year-olds should be safe taking vacation photos on crowded sidewalks, that 20 seconds of obstruction is all an abductor needs, and that DNA can reunite families even after 4 decades. And in Breckenridge, where a little girl with red wavy hair once photographed storefronts before being taken by a grieving stranger, her story lives on as proof that stolen children can be found and brought home. Sarah continues her foundation work while raising awareness about how adults with gaps in their childhood memories should investigate their origins, as thousands of missing children from past decades may be living under false identities. The case proved that even when abductors die before being held accountable, as Dorothy Mitchell did in 2023, finding the truth still matters for the families and the missing person who deserves to know their real identity. Linda told a documentary filmmaker that while she'd missed 40 years of Rebecca's life, she was grateful for every moment she now had with her daughter and grandchildren. "I missed her growing up, her graduations, her wedding, the births of my grandchildren," Linda said. "But I have today and tomorrow, and however many years were given, and that's more than I had for 40 years when I didn't know if she was alive." The disposable camera Rebecca had carried became symbolic in missing persons advocacy, representing the innocence of childhood and the moments when that innocence is stolen by those watching and waiting. And on Main Street in Breckenridge, where tourists still gather and families create vacation memories, Rebecca's story serves as a reminder of the importance of constant vigilance and the miracle that can happen when lost children finally come home. Tom Hawkins, who died in 2008 without knowing Rebecca's fate, was honored in a private ceremony where Sarah visited his grave and placed flowers, mourning the father she didn't remember, but who'd never stopped searching. "I wish I could have met him," Sarah told Linda. "I wish he could have known I was found and that I was okay, and I carry sadness that he died still searching and wondering." The case stands as a testament to mother's love that never wavers, to the power of DNA technology to solve seemingly impossible mysteries, and to the resilience of human beings who can integrate two identities and find peace. And 40 years after a 7-year-old with red, wavy hair vanished from a Colorado sidewalk in 20 seconds, Rebecca Hawkins had finally come home.